Thank you very much, Aitwell. Very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, colleagues, excellencies, representatives of states, parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, representatives of national human rights institutions, representatives of civil society organizations, honorable members of the African Commission, Acting Executive Secretary of the Commission, colleagues, staff of the Commission, our interpreters, translators, distinguished participants. A very warm welcome once again to this 66th ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights that we are convening virtually. This is the third day of the public session of the 66th ordinary session. And we would be starting with agenda item 3. This is the agenda item on the situation of human rights in Africa, with a specific focus on human and people's rights in the context of COVID-19. We have started on Monday, 13 July, receiving statements from states parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, NHRIs, and civil society organizations with observer status on this agenda item. We would start from where we stopped yesterday. To that end, I would request if the following are available. We have an NHRI, the National Commission of Human Rights of Rwanda, that requested for the floor. If the representative of the National Human Rights Commission of Rwanda is with us, this is the NHRI with affiliate number 3. If you are with us, we kindly request you to take the floor. As you take the floor, kindly switch on the video as well. As I wait to get indications on whether or not the representative of the National Commission of Human Rights of Rwanda is present, let me also request the following to be on standby. These are from non-governmental organizations. IPAS Africa Alliance, the representative of IPAS Africa Alliance, kindly be on standby. The representative of Independent Medical Legal Unit, EMLU, the representative of Associação Construndo Comunidades, Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition. Thank you once again very much. I now give the floor to the representative of the National Commission of Human Rights of Rwanda, Mukasine Marie-Claire. You have 5 minutes. Thank you. Kindly put the video on.
Yes. Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, honorable commissaire de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, Mesdames, Messieurs, bonjour et merci beaucoup de m'accorder cette occasion pour m'adresser en ma qualité de représentante de la Commission nationale des droits de la personne du Rwanda à la 66e session ordinaire de la Commission des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Mon nom, c'est Marie-Claire Mukasine et je suis la nouvelle présidente de la Commission nationale des droits de la personne au Rwanda depuis le 29 juin 2020. Je profite de cette occasion pour féliciter les nouveaux commissaires de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Je suis contente de rejoindre mes sœurs et mes frères africains afin de continuer à œuvrer pour la promotion et la protection des droits humains sur notre continent et aussi dans nos pays respectifs. Comme notre institution jouit du statut d'affilié devant la Commission africaine, mes prédécesseurs ont eu le privilège de participer à toutes les sessions ordinaires de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, et je vous assure qu'il en sera de même de ma part. Dans cette intervention, je vais vous présenter brièvement la situation des droits humains au Rwanda, attention particulière aux droits de l'homme et des peuples durant cette période de COVID-19. Chaque année, la Commission détermine la situation des droits de l'homme dans le pays en mettant l'accent spécial sur certains droits. Durant cette période de COVID-19, la Commission a décidé de travailler sur les droits suivants: droit à la vie, droit à la liberté du mouvement et de résidence, droit à la liberté d'expression, droit à la garantie de justice, droit à l'intégrité physique et mentale et droit à un niveau de vie suffisant, droit à la santé et droit au travail. La détermination de cette situation n'a pas empêché la Commission de recevoir les plaintes relatives aux droits humains de son peuple, de son propre initiative ou sur demande. Dans ce cadre, la Commission a reçu des plaintes comme d'habitude et les a traitées selon leurs spécificités. Et elle a également fait la surveillance des lieux de privation de liberté, à savoir les prisons, les cachots qui abritent les personnes suspectes d'avoir commis des crimes, les centres de transit, les centres de réhabilitation, les centres psychiatriques et les centres qui abritent les personnes âgées. Dans le cadre de la surveillance, elle a par ailleurs fait la surveillance dans les camps des réfugiés, du respect des droits de l'enfant à travers l'Observatoire des droits de l'enfant qui compte 3122 volontaires dans tous les 30 districts du pays et 416 secteurs. Dans le cadre de la surveillance et du respect des droits de la personne durant la période du COVID-19, la Commission a mené des activités suivantes: la sensibilisation et l'éducation de la population aux droits humains sur comment faire face à la crise sanitaire en évitant sa propagation et la contamination de cette dernière à la population. La Commission a adopté un plan d'action qui avait comme activité prédominante l'évaluation du respect des droits humains pendant la période de COVID-19. Dans cette évaluation, la Commission a effectué différentes actions, à savoir les investigations sur les cas de violation, abus de ces droits humains, les visites de différents lieux de privation de liberté, avec précaution bien sûr d'autoprotection et de protection des personnes privées de liberté, spécialement les lieux d'isolement, surtout dans les zones frontalières du Rwanda. La surveillance sur le respect des droits humains dans les cours et tribunaux, la rencontre avec les autorités pour s'assurer du respect des droits humains. Le plaidoyer nécessaire pour aider les victimes de violations, abus de droits humains à recouvrer leurs droits et aussi pour prévenir les violations ou les abus de droits humains. Il est à noter que pendant la période de COVID-19, la Commission a demandé des informations aux institutions de l'État habilitées pour connaître l'impact de la pandémie du COVID-19 sur le bien-être de la population rwandaise. Et dans la foulée, la Commission a été informée de l'importance de la technologie de l'information dans la lutte contre la propagation du coronavirus dans la population. Ainsi, par exemple, les drones ont été utilisés pour amener des médicaments aux malades du cancer et autres malades qui ne pouvaient pas se déplacer. Les opérations bancaires ont été effectuées via les téléphones portables pour éviter le contact avec la monnaie qui peut être aussi un moyen de transmission du coronavirus. La Commission a aussi été informée du contenu du plan national de reconstituer l'économie suite aux pertes subies à cause de la pandémie. Le résumé du rapport préliminaire de la Commission nationale des droits de la personne au Rwanda a été posté sur le site web de la Commission et les résultats ont été communiqués au public à travers une conférence de presse qui a été organisée immédiatement après la transmission du rapport complet avec des recommandations aux organes concernés. À titre d'exemple, concernant les recommandations qui ont été émises, ayant remarqué que les personnes détenues dans les stations de l'Office rwandais d'investigation, ils passent beaucoup plus de temps que celui prévu dans la loi, en attendant d'être transférés dans les prisons, vu que les tests de corona ne sont pas vite faits et que par conséquent, il y a risque d'engorgement de ces stations. La Commission a formulé la recommandation à l'Office rwandais d'investigation et à la police nationale du Rwanda et à l'organe national de poursuite judiciaire de collaborer avec le Centre biomédical du Rwanda pour accélérer les tests à faire aux personnes détenues dans les stations. Concernant le respect du droit à un niveau de vie suffisant, la Commission a constaté que ce droit était affecté d'une façon ou d'une autre par la perte définitive ou la suspension d'emploi dans le secteur privé et dans le secteur informel. Il a remarqué que le nombre de ceux qui ont perdu leur travail durant la période du Covid reste inconnu. Donc, la Commission a recommandé que le ministère des Finances et de la Planification économique et l'Institut national des statistiques conduisent une évaluation sur l'impact de la pandémie COVID sur le droit au travail et au droit au niveau de la vie suffisant dans le pays. La Commission, donc, a des perspectives d'avenir. Elle va continuer à exercer ses missions de promotion, de protection et de prévention de la torture, tout en s'adaptant sur le contexte sanitaire national. Elle envisage de mener bientôt une étude
Madam,
sur
your time is ending.
Oui, je termine. Donc, on va continuer à faire l'étude sur l'impact du COVID sur la population rwandaise et on fera un suivi régulier de la mise en application des recommandations que nous avons formulées dans différents rapports. Je vous remercie beaucoup de votre aimable attention.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I would like to congratulate you on assuming this new role of being the chairperson of the National Commission of Human Rights of Rwanda, and wish you all the best in this responsibility. We take note of your statement, including the activities undertaken by the National Commission of Human Rights of Rwanda, particularly in the context of COVID, in undertaking monitoring and advocacy activities, including in inspecting prisons, refugee centers, and child centers. Also, the investigation that you undertook to isolation centers to ensure that human rights are observed in those isolation centers. And also the collection of information on the impact of COVID-19 to the rights of Rwandans during this pandemic. We also take note of the report that you have prepared and the press briefing that you gave on that basis, including the recommendation for ensuring protection of prisons and detention centers where you have observed overcrowding of prison and detention population and recommended testing to be undertaken in those places. And also, we take note of, like many other countries on the continent, Rwandans have also been affected, particularly in terms of a serious impact on their adequate standard of living, as many people, although the number is unknown, lose their jobs, including the private sector and in the informal sector. Thank you very much once again for your statement. Do we have IPAS Africa Alliance? The representative of IPAS Africa Alliance, Eric Mundia. Okay, this is observer status number 421. Eric Mundia, you have 5 minutes.
Hello, Chairperson. Yeah.
Yes, we hear you. Kindly put them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, distinguished guests, and honorable commissioners and ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly observed. IPAS Africa Alliance wishes to welcome the 4 new commissioners and also to thank the Commission for arranging this 66th ordinary session, albeit under the circumstances. We wish to make our statement as follows. IPAS Africa Alliance for Women's Reproductive Health and Rights would like to thank the African Commission on Human and People's Rights for its continued push to advancing human rights in Africa, especially on sexual reproductive health and rights. The theme for the African Union for the year 2020 is on silencing of guns. However, under these special and unprecedented times, we would like to make our statement during this 66th ordinary session with a focus to the human rights situation in Africa and its impact caused by COVID-19. We recognize the important role the African Commission on Human and People's Rights plays in protecting the rights of all persons living in Africa. During this global pandemic occasioned by COVID-19, the Commission has stood firm to call for the protection of the human rights of all persons, even as governments sought to implement strategies and measures to curb the spread of the deadly virus. IPAS commends the efforts of the Commission and that of individual honorable commissioners who have sacrificed their time and resources to engage with the various civil society organizations in raising awareness on protection of human rights, as well as putting out statements to assert this important message. Honorable Chairperson, it is important to note that much has been done by state parties to ensure protection of human rights. However, much more needs to be done by state parties, as it has been largely accepted that COVID-19 will be thus much longer than wanted. IPAS, in its work across Africa to increase women's ability to access their sexual and reproductive health, has noted with concern that the restrictive laws on SRHR, including access to safe and legal abortion, continues to impact the high rates of maternal mortality and morbidity. We have further noted that SRHR services, including access to safe abortion services, have been relegated by government even after WHO provided guidelines on incorporating sexual reproductive health and rights services, including safe and legal abortion, as part of essential services. This situation has clearly been identified and reported in countries such as Uganda and Kenya, among others, where women and girls lack access to sexual reproductive health services. IPAS Africa Alliance with other like-minded stakeholders are in the process of carrying out a research on the impact of COVID-19 on SRHR services, including safe abortion. We will be sharing this report with the Commission once it's released. We further wish to highlight the rising cases of sexual and gender-based violence, as well as teenage pregnancies across African states. We urge the Commission to use its available mechanisms to indulge state parties to enact appropriate policies on reporting, as well as prosecution structures to protect the rights of women and girls who are majorly affected by these vices. IPAS contends that with these rising cases of sexual gender-based violence and teenage pregnancy, we will see a rise in cases of unsafe abortion, which will put many lives of women and girls at risk or cause serious health damage to their bodies. We would like to bring to the attention of the Commission the ongoing outright intimidation and threats to reproductive health rights advocates across several countries by groups opposed to access to sexual reproductive health information and access to services, including safe and legal abortion. It is with deep concern that we raise this issue with the Commission, as these anti-choice groups have resulted to intimidation and misinformation to turn the gains that many African states have made in protecting and ensuring all women and girls have access to quality reproductive health services, including safe and legal abortion. We urge the Commission to put out a statement condemning such acts by any person or persons against any person who is advocating for human rights, especially on reproductive health rights and protection of minority group rights. In the same breath, we would like to highlight the ongoing national debate in Namibia on decriminalization of abortion. IPAS encourages such national debates as a way of raising awareness to the need to eradicate restrictive laws on abortion in Africa, which do more harm than save lives. IPAS encourages more African states to undertake the same process of reviewing restrictive and penal laws on abortion as part of implementing the ACHPR decriminalization of abortion campaign, which was launched in 2016 through the Office of the Special Rapporteur on Women's Rights. This campaign affirms the World Health Organization reports that making abortion illegal does not reduce the abortion rates nor deter women from getting abortion. There is, however, a direct correlation between restrictive laws and women's access to safe abortion services. when abortion services are restricted by law, women are exposing themselves to a significant risk to death or disability. IPAS, in its previous statement to the Commission, noted the dire situation of human conflict in Cameroon and the risk that many women and girls are facing adversely affecting in accessing SRHR services. Thus, we urge the Commission to put to task the state of Cameroon,
Eric, please
Mauritius. Yes, Chairperson. Cameroon, Mauritius, and Niger, during their reporting, to explain the measures they are put to protect women and girls' right to access SRHR services. In conclusion, Honorable Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, we call upon the Commission to urge state parties to remove existing legal and medical procedural barriers impeding women and girls' access to SRHR services, to use its measures and mechanisms that are there to ensure that all state parties do implement the Maputo Protocol to its fullest, and to urge the member states to work with civil society to scale up the CRIM campaign. Honorable Chairperson, IPAS Africa Alliance reiterates its commitment to supporting the Commission achieve its mandate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your statement, Mr. Eric. On behalf of IPAS Africa Alliance, we take note of the issues that you have presented to us in terms of the impact of COVID-19 for sexual reproductive health services, including safe abortion on the African continent and in some of the countries that you have mentioned, concerns relating to rise in maternal morbidity and mortality rate in the context of COVID-19 as a result of lack of access to these services, spike in sexual and gender-based violence, and the increase in teenage pregnancy, and of course the issues relating to intimidation of those working in this sector, including those who advocate for sexual and reproductive health rights. We take note of these points, and indeed this is another dimension of the gender inequality that has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 and COVID-19 response measures on the continent. Thank you once again. Do we have Mr. Kevin Mwangi of the Independent Medical Legal Unit? I don't see any indication if a representative of Independent Medical Legal Unit is present with us. The next non-governmental organization is Associação Construndo Comunidades, ACC. Do we have Hermenegildo Sosa? Hermenegildo Sosa.
Yes, I'm present.
Welcome. Kindly put the video on. Thank you for that. This is the organization with observer status number 391. Please take the floor and present your statement. Thank you. You have 5 minutes.
Sua Excelência, Senhor Presidente da Comissão Africana, distintos delegados, distintos colegas, todos os protocolos observados. Permitam-me, Senhor Presidente, agradecer a oportunidade de nos dirigirmos a esta magna Assembleia e reportarmos sobre a situação dos direitos humanos em Angola e em África. Numa situação em que o mundo enfrenta esta grave crise sanitária, os desafios para respeitar e efetivar os direitos humanos...
Mr. Swasa, can you hold for a minute, please? I'm not sure if we have interpretation.
Okay, I'll repeat.
Mr. Swaso.
Sim.
Okay. All right. Please proceed. Thank you.
Senhor Presidente, agradecemos distintos comissários, distintos delegados, todos os protocolos observados e agradecemos a oportunidade de nos dirigirmos mais uma vez a esta comissão. numa fase em que o mundo enfrenta a pandemia e os desafios para efetivar os direitos humanos em África e em Angola têm aumentado. Não obstante isso, as organizações da sociedade civil em Angola, aqui a ACC e outras como o Mosaico, reconhecem as ações que o executivo angolano tem levado a cabo para assegurar os direitos humanos em Angola. E aqui citamos as ações legislativas, como o Decreto Presidencial 100/20 de 14 de abril, que aprova a Estratégia Nacional dos Direitos Humanos, as ações de combate à pandemia contra o Covid-19. Entretanto, senhor presidente, é com grande preocupação que as organizações angolanas, aqui a ACC, têm verificado ao longo do período de estado de emergência a violação dos direitos humanos em Angola, na província da Lunda Norte, no município do Quango, que no mês de abril registraram-se ações de violência por agentes da Polícia Nacional, atentado contra a integridade física à jovem Madalena Eugênio Bernardo, de 16 anos, ao senhor Nairobi Raimundo, de 33 anos. Atos de violência policial em tempo de pandemia ainda subsistem, senhor presidente. A exemplo, ainda nesta semana, o comandante da polícia, Valdemar José porta-voz da Comissão Interministerial, confirmou em conferência de imprensa que 2 pessoas foram baleadas por polícias no bairro do Prenda, na cidade de Luanda, e um foi hospitalizado gravemente. Lembrar que os direitos humanos, estes que foram aqui citados, são reconhecidos na Carta Africana, no artigo 4, e da Declaração Universal dos Direitos Humanos, no artigo 6, que Angola também ratificou e fazem parte da ordem jurídica angolana. A pandemia da Covid tornou ainda mais difícil os desafios de garantir os direitos econômicos, sociais e culturais. A redução da atividade econômica no setor privado e público diminui os rendimentos das famílias. A maioria da população vive de venda em ruas, de mercados durante o confinamento e ficou sem alternativa para sustentar as suas famílias. Para o programa de apoio do governo não abrange pequenas e médias empresas, nem tampouco as pequenas famílias, que sem ajuda de subsistência não conseguem sustentar os seus filhos. Senhor presidente, ainda nesta semana, por força da suspensão do ano letivo, foram quase 2.225 pessoas, professores e cidadãos, poderão perder os seus empregos. Perante essa realidade, acreditando que o papel da Comissão Africana é importante, a Associação Construindo Comunidade insta a Comissão Africana ao Estado angolano, a ir recomendar ao Estado angolano que o Estado angolano fiscalize e consciencialize e puna veementemente os agentes da Polícia Nacional que brutalmente agem contra os cidadãos e que sejam responsabilizados criminalmente e civilmente. Que o Executivo tome medidas concretas que ajudem, de facto, as empresas médias e pequenas empresas e as famílias a subsistirem neste tempo de pandemia. Que a Comissão Africana insta o governo angolano ainda para que observe que o que está estatuído na Carta Africana e demais convenções internacionais de promoção e respeito pelos direitos humanos em África. Obrigado pelo tempo, obrigado pela vossa atenção e tudo isto, senhor presidente, por uma África e uma Angola melhor. Obrigado.
Thank you very much for the statement. We take note of the issues of excessive use of force that you have highlighted that resulted in fatalities, and also the negative consequences of the COVID-19 and COVID-19 response measures, particularly on the income of families, those working in the informal sector, and also issues relating to the conduct of National Police Service in the way they treat Angolans. Thank you very much for your statement once again. The next is Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition.
Yes, Your Excellency, Honorable Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights.
Just hold on. Can you put on the video? Can you let us know if you are managing to open the video?
No, I'm trying.
The next speaker is the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law. International Center for Not-for-Profit Law, ERND. If we have Irene Petras.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we will let in the representative of Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition back when the video is on. Please proceed. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the Chairperson, members of the Commission and distinguished delegates. On behalf of the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law, I thank you for the opportunity to present this statement. Civil society and human rights defenders in Africa continue to experience growing barriers to their ability to operate freely because of restrictive laws, policies, and administrative practices. This is even more evident since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. In March 2020, ICNL developed a COVID-19 civic freedom tracker to monitor government responses to the pandemic that affect civic freedoms and human rights. In Africa, ICNL is presently tracking emergency laws and related measures in 46 countries. We have identified 141 new measures by governments responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of the measures are some form of executive order or proclamation. We have counted 34 declarations of states of emergency, national health emergencies, or national disasters in 30 countries. Only one of these countries has since lifted its state of emergency as at July the 13th. We have also recorded 106 other executive measures not arising to a state of emergency. At least 37 of the 46 countries have either fully or partially prohibited gatherings. At least 36 countries have imposed lockdowns, and only 11 of these 36 countries have fully or partially lifted these lockdowns. At least 25 of the 46 countries have imposed curfews, with only 9 countries having lifted these. Governments are increasingly cracking down on dissent by using fake news or disinformation charges to suppress public criticism of a government's response to the pandemic, and at least 8 countries have introduced such new measures or are relying on existing laws and regulations. Based on the global data collected through the ICNL tracker, 9 trends have emerged as key ways in which governments are impeding the role of civil society in responding to the pandemic. These are not unique to Africa. They offer food for thought for the Honorable Commission, state parties, national human rights institutions, and civil society as to how we can strengthen and make more effective our response to COVID-19. First, the imposition of measures such as curfews and stay-at-home orders often fail to exempt CSOs from delivering life-saving services. Second, governments are limiting access to timely, accurate public information on the nature of the crisis. This weakens civil society's ability to assess the needs of communities and provide effective assistance. Third, governments are excluding civil society from decision-making in the design and review of their strategies and plans, and so responses are less likely to address the needs of marginalized communities. Fourth, under the pretext of targeting misinformation and fake news, governments are chilling free expression, shielding themselves from criticism while penalizing dissent. Fifth, while limiting gatherings may be a legitimate response to the outbreak of a contagious disease, many assembly bans are absolute, with no exception for socially distanced peaceful protest. Sixth, governments are employing intrusive surveillance technology to fight COVID-19, including facial recognition systems, tracking software, and expanded surveillance systems. It is not clear that these measures are temporary or that the data collected will only be used to respond to the COVID-19 emergency. Seven, emergency measures are shifting power to the executive branch, eroding democratic checks and balances by parliaments and the judiciary. As a result, CSOs in many countries are unable to challenge the COVID-inspired laws and practices. Eight, governments are casting COVID-19 as a national security threat to make it easier to defend extraordinary measures that infringe rights and freedoms. Finally, governments are using COVID-19 responses to justify authoritarian rule as the best way to defeat the pandemic. Honorable Chairperson, esteemed commissioners, distinguished delegates, state responses to public health threats are stronger and more effective when they include civil society and protect human rights. I'm winding up now.
Yeah, your time is.
Policymakers should enable civil society's participation in decision-making around the pandemic response and remove barriers impeding organizations engaged in COVID-related aid. Civil society should form broad coalition to safeguard rights, while the international community should work to safeguard civic space and uphold democratic norms. We commend the Commission for its continued engagement on these critical issues and for its human rights-based response to COVID-19, and ICNL stands ready to continue to assist the Commission in this response. Thank you very much, Chair.
Apologies for that. The International Center for Not-for-Profit Law has observer status number 503. And we thank the center for the statement, which presented to us some 141 new measures that have been adopted by states, which take different forms across different countries, including some 34 declarations of states of emergency or states of disaster across the continent, some 104 executive measures taken by various governments, with some 36 countries adopting partial or full lockdown measures. And based on their assessment of the trends, there are the data. 9 trends have been identified. I will not repeat those 9 trends, but these 9 trends are indicative of the various human rights issues that have emerged as a result of the COVID-19 response measures, because of the nature of these measures and because of the way these measures have been enforced. These include, for example, the use of surveillance technology and the threat that this surveillance technology may pose, particularly if it is going to be indefinite and if it is going to be used for collecting data other than those relevant for purpose of fighting COVID-19. I think we have also taken note of the issues relating to the shift in power with the executive accumulating a huge amount of power with very limited checks and balances from other centers of power. And of course, the concern being we have to be vigilant to ensure that these measures will not be institutionalized and that they would be rolled back as soon as the threat that the pandemic poses is contained. Now, I'm going back to receive the statement from Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition. I understand that Mr. Jones Sendodo is online. Mr. Jones, kindly proceed.
Yes, Your Excellency, Honorable Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Your Excellency, Honorable Commissioners, Honorable diplomats and accredited to Gambia and state delegates, good afternoon. On behalf of Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition, we welcome this opportunity to address the 66th ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And to start with, allow me to congratulate the government of the United Republic of Tanzania for its successful and unique efforts toward fighting the COVID-19 pandemic in Tanzania. As you all know, Tanzania managed to deal with the COVID-19 without a total lockdown. And the government of Tanzania adopted both traditional and scientific methods in the fight against COVID-19. It paid special emphasis on ensuring that the general public is free from fear of the pandemic, and this was a very successful, despite some few reported cases of deaths. And in the special way, I also wish to congratulate the government of Tanzania for recently achieving a lower middle income status, as reported by the World Bank in July 1st, 2020. Honorable Chairperson, the role of CSOs in Tanzania in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic cannot be underestimated in this in the fight against the COVID-19. Since the outbreak, more than 100 CSOs provided education to civil society, to the society on the preventive measures against COVID-19 pandemic, and 12 CSOs distributed preventive medical measures such as face mask, hand sanitizer, and soaps in both Tanzania mainland and Zanzibar, and also 42 CSOs engaged in capacity building and the awareness activities in the society. But at the same time, THRDC provided legal aid to 21 human rights defenders and individual journalists, but they also developed 1,500 braille copies of COVID-19 preventive guidelines for DIF HRD organization in Tanzania. I recognize the role of journalists in reporting COVID-19 incidents. THRDC conducted also an online campaign to 67 journalists on how best they can do their work while remaining safe. Also, in April, Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition, under the umbrella of CSO's Directors Forum, an online loose network, developed the CSO's position paper and the strategic intervention on COVID-19 pandemic. And the aim of this was to explain how best the CSOs and the government can do can explore possible synergies that can be explored to work together with CSOs in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. Honorable Chairperson, allow me also to highlight some key human rights issues that are critical to the work of human rights defenders in Tanzania. As you all are aware, on 21st November 2019, the government of Tanzania withdrew its declaration that allowed individuals and NGOs to file complaints to the African Court on Human and People's Rights. And so for CSOs defending human rights in Tanzania, they are now not allowed to file cases to the African Court on Human and People's Rights. And this is an impediment to the access to justice for Tanzanians. Also, in June 2020, through the Parliament of Tanzania, it was passed, a law was passed, which seeks, among other provisions, to abolish public interest litigation. And so now a normal individual or CSOs cannot file a case against the government complaining on a violation of human rights for any group in the public. Also, as you all are aware, there is a worsening situation of human rights insofar as freedom of expression is concerned. And this is because of the enactment of various laws, such as the Media Services Act, the Access to Information Act, the Statistics Act, the Online Content Regulations, and the Cyber Crimes Act. And as of July, several newspapers were banned, and several online TVs were also punished for running online TVs without registrations. But also in terms of freedom of expression.
Mr. Sedondo,
So far is
please, your time is up.
Freedom of association and assembly is concerned. Political rights in Tanzania, as you're all aware, is
Mr.
restricted
Sedondo,
because
your time is up. Kindly conclude, please. Okay, thank you very much for your statement. On the role of civil society organizations in Tanzania during this pandemic of COVID-19, including in terms of advocacy work that they have done for educating the Tanzanian public in relation to COVID-19, the work that they have done in terms of distributing sanitizers, the legal aid support that they have provided to human rights defenders and journalists, as well as the various interventions, including through the issuing of CSO's position paper. And the concern that you have also raised in relation to the decision of the Tanzanian government to withdraw its Article 34.6 declaration to the African Court on Human and People's Rights protocol, as well as the June 2020 law of the Tanzanian parliament that restricted the constitutional provisions that allowed public interest litigation in Tanzania. Most notably, the list of laws that you have mentioned that have very severe consequences in terms of stifling freedom of expression, free media, as well as the civic space. These are all well noted. Thank you once again. This is Tanzania Human Rights Defenders Coalition with observer status number 470. The next on the list is Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights. I do understand that. Do we have? Yes, I do understand that the representative of Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights is Roslyn Hanzi. Roslyn, do we Are you with us? Okay, I think Rosalind is with us. This is the NGO with observer status 329. Rosalind, you have the floor, please. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Chairperson, Honorable Commissioners, State Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights presents this.
Excuse me. Okay, I understand that it's you are speaking on behalf of Rosalind Hanzi.
Indeed.
Okay, can you put on the video, please? Thank you. Please proceed.
Chairperson, Honorable Commissioners, State Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights presents the statement during the 66th session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. The ACHPR acknowledges efforts by the government of Zimbabwe in cooperating with the human rights mechanisms of the African Union and the United Nations. In 2019, Zimbabwe allowed the United Nations Special Rapporteurs on the Right to Food and the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Peaceful Assembly and Association to conduct country visits in Zimbabwe. The ACHPR calls on the ACHPR to encourage the government of Zimbabwe to embrace the recommendations made by these mandates. The government of Zimbabwe also submitted its outstanding periodic reports to the ACHPR. However, during the period since the 65th session, human rights situation in Zimbabwe remains a reason for cause. With regards to the civil and political rights, Zimbabwe has introduced the national lockdown in March 2020 to curb the spread of the coronavirus. During the lockdown, there has been marked increase of human rights violation. The members of the Zimbabwe Republic Police and the military have wantonly assaulted and injured civilians under the guise of enforcing lockdown regulations. Incidents of arbitrary arrests, unlawful detention, and malicious prosecutions of human rights defenders and opposition political activists and ordinary citizens under the guise of enforcing COVID-19 regulations continued unabated. Human rights lawyers continue to be targeted for doing their work. A number of lawyers have been arrested on spurious charges and allegations. The attacks on the lawyers undermine the rights of lawyers to freely represent clients and provide effective legal representation. The intimidation and harassment of lawyers is a violation of Article 7 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and Article 14 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, guaranteeing the right to legal counsel of one's choice. The right to freedom of association, assembly, and to peacefully demonstrate continues to be under siege, with the police prohibiting demonstrations. In March 2020, 3 political activists who are members of the Movement for Democratic Change, namely Cecilia Chimbiri, Netai Marwa, and Joanna Mamombe, reported to the police that they've been abducted by suspected state agents, including police officers. They are now being prosecuted for publishing false statements. Those who organize or peacefully participate in peaceful protests continue to be targeted. Most have been arrested and prosecuted for participating in protests. Security of HRDs and political activists remain a challenge, and those responsible for their torture and abduction have not been accountable. With regards to social and economic rights, the economic situation in Zimbabwe remains dire, with prices of basic commodities beyond the reach of many citizens. Inflation is at all-time high, eroding the wages of professionals below the poverty data line. As a result, civil servants, particularly in the health sector, have engaged in industrial action, which unfortunately has been ignored by the government of Zimbabwe. Just like all the countries in the world, Zimbabwe has been affected by COVID-19. In spite of the donations provided by local international donors, the COVID-19 response and preparedness in Zimbabwe remains very weak. Allegations of looting of COVID-19 funds under corrupt schemes depriving the beneficiaries have been raised. Nurses and other health personnel work in extreme difficult conditions without personal protective equipment. Hence, most of them have contracted COVID-19 and remain in isolation. Nurses are on strike during a time when their services are most required. In addition, the water situation has become dire, with at least 13 people dying from drinking contaminated water in Matebeleland. Under institutional reform, government of Zimbabwe has repealed the Public Order and Security Act and replaced it with the Maintenance of Peace Act. Implementation of this law does not reflect any changes to advance the right to freedom of association and assembly. Meetings for HRDs and opposition political parties have been prohibited using the same law. Access to Information and Protection of Private Act was repealed and replaced with another law, Freedom to Information Act. This is a new law, and the HRD is monitoring how this law is going to be applied. Instead of aligning laws to the Constitution, the government is embarked on a process of amending the Constitution, introducing critical reforms that undermine the concept of separation of power and the right of citizens to participate in the government of the country. The ZLHR remains open to constructively engage the government of Zimbabwe. However, we urge the ACHPR to encourage the government of Zimbabwe to, 1, take all measures to guarantee the security of everyone, including those regarded as critics of government policies. 2, provide funding towards solving perennial water challenges in the country, including funding for health sector. 3, guarantee political rights of citizens and create an environment in which the rights to assembly, expression, and association are promoted. 4, provide adequate resources and guarantee independence of institutions supporting democracy. 5, cease the process of amending the Constitution and to fully...
Shoko, your time is up.
I'll just round up and state the 3 remaining issues. Since the process of amending the Constitution and fully align all laws in the Constitution, implement all provisions of the Constitution, and reform institutions to efficiently and effectively discharge their constitutional mandate, and implement recommendations of the UN Special Rapporteurs that have visited the country, and lastly, issue standing invitations to the special procedures, particularly Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights, for this statement. When colleagues take the floor, sometimes with pressure of time, they read their statement very fast, which may be very difficult for interpreters to follow closely and do the interpretation. So I would like to remind colleagues to be mindful of the need for interpretation as they read their statement. But we take note of the various issues that have been highlighted in relation to the situation in Zimbabwe in the context of COVID-19, including the use of the COVID-19 response measures in restricting the activities of opposition political members, civil society organizations, human rights defenders, and lawyers, particularly issues affecting the right of people to legal counsel, with lawyers facing harassment from state agencies in the name of enforcing COVID-19 measures. I think a very important issue have been highlighted in terms of the balance between COVID-19 measures and the right of people to freedom of assembly. So the possibility of people holding freedom of exercising their freedom of assembly while observing social distancing. What are the requirements there? The socioeconomic situation that have been highlighted, which is a point that we have also taken note of and raised when we reviewed the Zimbabwe state report during the last ordinary session in November. But we particularly take note of issues affecting in particular civil servants, particularly those working in the health sector. And indeed, we have received the reports on the looting of COVID-19 funds. This is an area of concern at a time when many people are suffering from various pressures due to the socioeconomic situation in the country. We take note of the various other issues that you have raised as well. Thank you once again. The next is the Center for Human Rights. The Center for Human Rights. Do we have, okay, Professor Franz Willion. This is observer status number 116. Professor Franz Villion, if you could put on the video and take the floor.
A good day, Chairperson, members of the Commission, in particular the newly inaugurated commissioners. Thank you very much for the opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to use the opportunity to address you by responding and speaking about three issues very briefly. The first is COVID-19. The Center for Human Rights at University of Pretoria commends the Commission for acting with energy and with thoughtfulness in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We, however, view the situation as one that also invites a recording and a follow-up to the responses by states. We therefore urge the Commission to follow up and to ensure that states report on the implementation of the numerous recommendations contained in the Commission's statements and urgent appeals, and to develop a publicly accessible database in which the follow-up and implementation is recorded. We also note the Commission's urgent appeal to the Republic of South Africa regarding enforcement of lockdown measures by security forces. The Centre remains gravely concerned about the use of excessive force during the lockdown in South Africa and elsewhere on the continent. The well-publicized case of Collins Khoza at the hands and his death at the hands of security forces is one emblematic case, but there are many more. The South African Independent Police Directorate on 8 June 2020 reported to Parliament that 10 people had died as a result of police action during the enforcement of the lockdown, and that 376 more cases of violent action and excessive violence were under investigation. The Centre therefore calls on the government to communicate unequivocally and continuously its abhorrence of excessive violence, to take all measures to expeditiously investigate all actions by police resulting in killing and other brutality, and to provide full and easily accessible information about all reported, investigated and concluded cases during the lockdown. The second issue relates to the Commission's new rules of procedure. The Centre commends the Commission for having adopted its 2020 rules of procedure. We in particular commend the Commission for formalizing a process of inviting and admitting requests from amici curiae to the Commission. And we urge the Commission to make a forthwith use of this competence to invite amicus curiae briefs in respect of communications that are already pending before it. And the Centre for Human Rights avails itself to assist the Commission in this regard. We also note that the aspect of the relationship between the Commission and the Court is being addressed in Rule 130, which explicitly allows for the referral by the Commission to the Court of cases that have not yet been declared admissible by the Commission. While we regard this as commendable, the Commission, in our view, should further develop transparent guidelines on the circumstances under which such cases will be referred to the Court. These factors should relate, for example, to why the specific case needs to be determined by the Court, by a judicial decision, rather than by the Commission. And the factors that could be considered may include the nature and the urgency of the case, and the record of non-compliance with the Commission's recommendations or decisions by the particular state concerned. The need for such clarity has become pronounced in the light of the risk posed to the Commission and the African system in general by the withdrawal of now 4 states of their direct access declarations under the Court protocol. We also urge the Commission to still develop guidelines about the referral of cases to the court in instances where the matter has progressed beyond admissibility. For example, when the Commission had already decided the case on the merits and the particular state has not complied with the Commission's decision. The last issue, very briefly, is that of sexual orientation, gender identity, and sex characteristics. And the Center notes with great pleasure the recent development of Gabon having decriminalized same-sex relationships, and South Africa having prohibited the Marriage Office refusal to register same-sex marriages. And we call on the Commission to urge other states that have not yet decriminalized adult same-sex consensual relations to follow the example of Gabon in this regard. We highlight that during the COVID pandemic, the general vulnerability of LGBTI+ communities have been exacerbated, and we urge the Commission once again to call on all state parties to ensure that measures that protect the communities from violence and discrimination are taken in line with the Commission's resolution 275. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Franz Villion, for the statement from the Center for Human Rights on various issues relating to COVID-19 response of the Commission, particularly urging the Commission to monitor the follow-up and implementation of its statements and its letters of urgent appeal by states and providing ways and means of knowing what actions have been taken by states in relation to those statements and letters of urgent appeal. We take note also of the concern which the Commission shares with all those who spoke previously relating to excessive use of force, including in the context of South Africa, in relation to which the Commission sent a letter of urgent appeal, as highlighted by the emblematic death of Collins Koza, but also the 376 other cases that are being investigated by the police oversight body in South Africa. We also take note of the points that you have highlighted in relation to the 2020 rules of procedure of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which have been published on the website of the Commission and has become effective. And the issues relating to amicus curiae, but also on the relationship between the Commission and the court. We also take note of your appeal to the Commission to urge member states to comply with and observe the resolution of the Commission 275 on protecting people with sexual orientation, to protect people from violence and discrimination on the basis of their actual or imputed sexual orientation, but also to follow the examples of South Africa and Gabon, among others, in terms of protecting this category of minority groups on the African continent. We once again thank you for your statement. The next is, I have been informed by colleagues that the Minister of Constitutional Justice and Constitutional Affairs of Tanzania, Dr. Mwangulu Nchemba, have requested to take the floor to exercise the right of reply of the Republic of Tanzania with respect to issues that have been raised in the course of today's proceeding on the human rights situation in Tanzania. Minister Nchemba, if you are with us and ready to take the floor? Okay, it looks like that Minister Nchemba is not yet ready to take the floor. So while awaiting the minister to be ready to take the floor, I would now invite Environment Resources, Natural Development. This is the NGO with observer status 498, represented by Innocent Bismois. Mr. Bismois, if you are here with us, kindly take the floor, put the video on. And at this point in time, I would like to inform colleagues that I've been advised by the Secretariat that we don't have to insist on the timelines. We should allow speakers to finish their statement. So, do we have Mr. Bismois? Okay, so the floor is yours, Mr. Bismois. Okay, I think we have Mr. Bisimwa with us. Kindly put the video on. It looks like that we are having a technical problem. We will await Mr. Innocent Bisimua to have the technical issues sorted. We move to the next. We move to the next one.
Hello?
Can you put the video on, please? Okay. We take the next one while Mr. Bisimwa is ready. Also, if the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs of Tanzania, whenever you are ready, Minister, kindly let us know. We will give you the floor. The next one is Africa Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies. This is the NGO with observer status number 14.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
Kindly.
Yes.
Yes. Good. All right. Please proceed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Mr. Vice Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, distinguished guests, representative of human rights institution, colleagues from civil society, let me first congratulate and welcome the newly appointed commissioner and wish them the best of luck in their noble mission. The world is now facing unprecedented health pandemic, coronavirus, COVID-19. The epidemic began in China in December 2019 and has spread at an alarming rate in Asia, Europe, and America. It spread rapidly across North Africa, recording significant cases of COVID-19. Although the pandemic is considered a health problem, its management and its impact has critical economic, social, political, and psychological consequences. At the same time, the emergency has bred new responses and forms of both local and global solidarity that either build on existing positive official or unofficial responses to the virus or compensate for a lack thereof. Several measures have been taken to counter the disease, which has both an economic and social impact on the lives of population. Lifestyle have been strongly shaken and disrupted. And so population life have been disrupted. In this new context, it is important to ensure that vulnerable groups are not yet marginalized or suffer more seriously from the effect of this disease. Indeed, throughout the continent, NGOs and civil society are mobilized to contribute to response to this pandemic, and we must continue to maintain pressure and advocacy so that fundamental freedoms that are the foundation of our society are maintained, so that the right to health and health services are the same for all, rich and poor, so that the freedom of expression is promoted to the fullest extent, so that the freedom of movement that have been momentarily interrupted and resorted, so that governments do not use pandemic to restrict civic space, because in the face of death, we are all equal. In North Africa, a lot of restrictive laws on freedom of assembly and association and freedom of expression. The government in North Africa tried to adopt new laws during the state of emergency to restrict the work of journalists, bloggers, and human rights defenders. Arbitrary measures have been taken to arrest bloggers for spreading fake news. While everyone is definitely affected by the ravage of the COVID-19 pandemic, the reality of its impacts on well-being of women and girls, not only in Africa, but around the world, calls for a special response. With indebted economies, weak health system, entrenched system, social inequality, and crude political elite class, human rights defenders are experiencing the impact of COVID-19. In general, defenders, journalists, lawyers, youth, civil society organizations, institutions, sexual minority, and other vulnerable groups are already suffering from the full impact of the pandemic. The Independent Commission for Human Rights in North Africa, CEDH, has carried out several activities to monitor, coordinate, and support human rights defenders in North Africa by limiting the spread of the virus, reducing the impact, while strengthening solidarity with those on the front line and most affected. CEDH calls on the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to, first, include civil society in contingency plans and ensure that government responses address intersectional oppression. Second, advocate and influence the provision of services and interventions for human rights defenders imprisoned in prison. Third, advocate and influence the formulation and subsequent implementation compliance with the human rights response and recovery policy at the national, regional, and global levels. Fourth, instill real-time mechanism to assess and monitor the socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 on human rights defenders in all their diversity, and share timely, reliable, and authoritative information and analysis on COVID-19. The last one, mobilize and coordinate the response of human rights organization in its multi-dimensional diversity to strengthen networks and build solidarity for sustainable transformative intervention. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much for your statement from the Africa Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, highlighting the impact of COVID-19, specifically on issues relating to the role of civil society organizations and human rights defenders, and proposing to the Commission various measures that could be taken in terms of the inclusion of civil society organizations in contingency plans. Also the point that you have highlighted about addressing intersectional oppression and violence, the human rights of defenders in prison and detention conditions, as well as the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 and COVID-19 measures on human rights defenders. Thank you for the statement again. The next may I request if the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs of Tanzania is with us? Minister Nchemba, are you with us? Okay. Thank you. It doesn't look like that Minister Nchemba is ready as yet. The next one is Equality Now. Equality Now, represented by Mr. Kennedy Muikia. This is the organization with observer status 281. Okay, we have the representative of Equality Now. You have the floor. Kindly put on the video and present your statement. Thank you.
Honorable Chairperson of the ACHPR, the Solidarity for African Women's Rights, SOARW, is a coalition of over 50 organizations working on women's rights in 27 countries in Africa.
Excuse me, are you presenting for Equality Now?
I'm presenting for Alliance for Africa, which is delivering its statement as a member of the Solidarity for African Women's Rights Coalition. Equality Now is the secretariat of the SOAR coalition.
Okay, I think it creates a confusion when you say you are presenting on behalf of an organization for which we don't have observer status. So I think it's better that you clear it, that you are presenting Equality Now statement, the statement of Equality Now.
Honorable Commissioner, I'd like to just note that the statement for Equality Now has not been delivered to the Secretariat yet, but Alliance for Africa.
All right. Hold on.
Yes.
So we will proceed, when it is ready. Thank you very much. In the meantime, communicate this one to the Secretariat,
Okay.
get registration, and then you will deliver it accordingly.
Okay.
Thank you. The next one is World Alliance for Citizen Participation, Civicus. Okay, I understand that the representative of Civicus, Mr. Paul Mlindua, is with us. This is the organization with observer status 431. Mr. Mlindua, kindly take the podium and present the statement. Please put on the video. Thank you.
Honorable Chairperson, Commissioner of African Commission on Human People's Rights, the Global Civil Society Alliance, Civicus, welcomes this opportunity to address the African Commission under this item. The COVID pandemic affects us all, and while we recognize the need for states to implement policies that promote social distancing and limit movements to curb the spread of the pandemic, all responses must be premised around the cross-cutting principles of respect for human dignity, independence and autonomy of the person, non-discrimination and equality and respect of diversities and inclusion. We are, however, concerned about the human rights violations and civic space restrictions that have accompanied the responses of many states. We are also worried that some states have used the pandemic as a pretext to curtail the fundamental rights of their citizens as enshrined in the African Charter. During the period of health emergencies such as this, the free flow of information is vital to informing the public about the nature of the virus and to implement the measures to curb its spread. We are, however, concerned about the fact that journalists have been subjected to physical attacks, arbitrary arrests, and unlawful detention in countries such as Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, and Zimbabwe for reporting on pandemic. Governments are also using disinformation laws and fake news provisions to restrict freedom of expression. We are concerned about the multiple cases of police security force brutality while enforcing social distancing measures in countries like South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and Rwanda. Most of those who are targeted with violence by security forces are from vulnerable communities, In some countries, civil society organizations have been targeted and prevented from delivering much needed medical aid and relief. Aid workers have been arrested and accused of violating social distancing rules, and others subjected to judicial persecution for delivering face masks in communities. Honorable Chairperson, we are also concerned that some governments are excluding the voices of civil society in decision-making and therefore overlooking critical voices in their responses. When civil society voices are excluded, the specific needs and challenges of excluded groups are not adequately addressed. Again, the response of some governments have not adequately taken into account the needs of vulnerable groups like refugees, while many have been forcibly evicted from their dwellings, sometimes under difficult weather conditions. Honorable Chairperson, to conclude, the responses of all states should be proportionate and in line with the provisions of the African Charter. We thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Paul Mulindwa, for the statement of World Alliance for Citizen Participation, addressing once again the various human rights issues arising from COVID-19 response measures adopted by African states, ranging from those imposing undue restriction on various rights and freedoms enshrined in the African Charter to violence meted out particularly against the most vulnerable and the poor, issues affecting aid workers, as well as the exclusion of CSOs. Some of these issues are issues that have become recurrent and common across the various statements that we have received. We once again thank you for your statement. Earlier on, we were trying to give the floor to Mr. Innocent Bisimwa. If Mr. Innocent Bisimwa is ready. This is Environment Resource Naturally Development Organization with Observer Status 498. Mr. Bisimwa, put on the video and take the floor. Thank you. I think we are experiencing another difficulty in having Mr. Bisimwa connected. So we will await this being fixed. Let me once again request if the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs of Tanzania is with us. Minister Nchemba. Okay, the minister is not with us either. At this point in time, while awaiting Mr. Innocent Bisimwa and the minister to be ready to take the floor, may I request that we take an early break and come back at 2. Excuse. Come back at 11 GMT. 11 GMT. So I'm operating on the basis of at this time. So at this time may not be the time for many of you colleagues out there. So 11 GMT. This would be after half an hour. Thank you all very much.